Hi, everyone, and welcome to Overcoming the Podcast. I have with me a guest that I kind of scoped out myself, a little intuitive nudge because I love the way that she runs everything. She's so true to herself, and she's highly into the spirituality, woo-woo side, all the things that y'all know that I love, and I've been embracing a lot more over the last couple of years. And we were just talking about what is going on right now in the universe. And let me tell you, by the time this comes out, it probably won't be that way. But right now, we're coming into Mercury in retrograde. We're coming into a Pisces full moon, which we both have Pisces in us. And also, there's just miscommunications abound. Mars is in Gemini. There's all of these things that is like, the past is coming up and driving us a little bonkers. So we were literally just talking and like vibing. We're like, we should probably record this. So we're going to let you in. We're talking about triggers and when things come back up and how you work through it. So Liz, if you want to introduce yourself, we can introduce, you can just kind of jump right in. I just want everyone to kind of feel the real that's going on right here. Cause I think people relate that when you're just triggered and it's hard stuff.
Yeah. So before I introduce myself, I'm a mystery woman.
You're mystery.
I want to respond to what you just said about being in this energy where the past is coming back up. Yes. And where for those of us who are on the healing journey in this committed way and just really taking one step in front of the other every day and just trusting and hoping and evolving and hurting and for all of us, when this type of energy comes up, like a full moon in Pisces, where we have double water, and it's really cool because in the tarot, in the major arcana, the Pisces card is the moon.
Yes.
And the moon is this very feminine energy. It's this invitation to go deep within ourselves, within our communities, within our wounds, with the promise that we'll emerge on the other side feeling wiser, more grounded, more competent, and more fluid in our approach to our healing.
Yes.
So we just have all of this beautiful energy. But going back to what we were just talking about before we got on, is as a survivor and as we're survivors, we obviously approach the world differently. And as we're on this healing journey, we have to really keep checking in with ourselves and multiple inner children.
Yes.
To really ground ourselves and find out what's going on here. And this morning I got an email, perfectly reasonable email, someone following up with me, but I got immediately triggered and I felt my whole body go, yuck.
Yeah.
Woof. And I had to really take a step back and say, I'm triggered.
Yeah.
I don't have to know why right now. I'll let that unfold as it wants to.
Yes.
But I just need to take a step back and not react.
Yeah. I love that. And you touch on so many of like the science concepts there too, that like what you said, like highlighting that, like, I recognize I'm triggered. I don't need to know why right now. What's really important is when we're looking into the aspect of how you work through things, I believe it was Siegel, that you regulate yourself first and then you go to reasoning, right? So you don't always have to know in the moment what's happening, but afterwards, you're going to step back and be like, okay, so this was happening because of this. This is how I can prepare myself next time. It's just like with kids. If you're working with a kiddo or, you're interacting with a kid and they're having a really hard time and they're heavy in their emotions, you're not going to be sitting there while they're unable to focus and they're having a tantrum or something, or they're crying, to go, okay, this is not right because da 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 da. You're not reasoning with the child at that point. You're helping the child calm down, get back to where they need to be. And then afterwards, you can have a discussion of, okay, so this is what happened. And this is what we can do differently next time. Right. So it's kind of the same thing with us. Like, we're not always going to be like logic ourselves through it when we can't even access that part of our brain right now.
Yeah. And I think that's a really valuable point that you make. That's valuable for all survivors, where it really is. I think there can be a misconception. I definitely held it for a long time, that I had to know why I was upset before doing anything about it. Or that was somehow the goal. like to have that kind of insight in the moment. And, the fact is we're still animals filled with water and electricity. Yes. And so like
we're made of stars.
Those impulses will fire. And so exactly being able, understanding that it's regulation first. Regulation first, reasoning will come when it comes. And probably when you're able to absorb or integrate that message, like whatever that message or that thing that you overcame was. But in that regulating, that's the proof of the healing, right?
Yes,
it's just going straight to regulation.
And when we're in this, especially, so when we add in like the spiritual component of like energy shifting and like, we have triggers internally, but we also know that our environment can impact us so much, right? And so we get into like the spirituality woo-woo side of things when like everything is shifting and everything in the stars is like, okay, we're bringing you back to the past, like on top of the fact that you are a trauma survivor and you're always there, we're diving deeper. And usually I find that when we're diving deeper into the past, it's to be able to look back, to work through the stuff that we think we've either pushed down or that's ready to come up so we can move forward, so we can level up. Because I don't know about you, but I know I'm about ready to go through this huge level up. My life as I know it is about to change. I've been feeling this for months and it's like, it's here, right? But it's this last push, this last revisit to these things that I know do not serve me. And how are you going to handle it? And to the point where I have felt so unhinged that yesterday I recorded a video to my future self, basically roasting myself, saying, do not go back to this person, to this thing that is going to test you. Like, better. You've been doing this. I don't care if there's feelings. Maybe don't plan your wedding on a first date. Like, come on. Like, I literally was just telling myself, I'm like, while I am somewhat sane right now, knowing and feeling what I'm stepping into, don't do it. And it's hilarious, but it actually was a strategy that really works for me. I'm like, oh yeah, I can pep talk myself, but it's just, you do what you got to do. You do what you got to do.
I need to try that. I love that idea. And that's a perfect full moon exercise too. Recording a video too. I love that it's like Michael Scott from The Office, like
right. I was like, Nick Miller did that to a New Girl. Like after a breakup, it was like, don't go back to her. And I was like, yes, I need to do this in my life. This is amazing.
It's so smart. And like, again, under the full moon, doing it in this energy of the full moon. Yeah. So powerful, where you're really setting that boundary and being like, look, come back to this.
Yeah. Like, please,
and then act accordingly.
We're going forward. You're not, the thing that I've been telling myself is like, if it does not set my soul on fire as the quality one, and the other one is if it does not align to what you were stepping into, it doesn't need to be there. It just doesn't. And that's hard because I, especially as like the heavy Pisces, watery, loving energy, also like Cancer chart ruler, like all the water and all of the nurturing care that I want to connect with people so much. Also, my hurt inner child is like, oh my gosh, we just want love. Oh my goodness, we just want connection with friends and everything. And like, I hold on to these connections with people lifelong, even after they've hurt me. Parents and things that I've definitely cut off, but I'm someone who holds on to those feelings because once it's there, it's kind of always going to be there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it rules my life, but I know that there's a piece of my heart that is forever touched by anyone that I meet. And that's a blessing and a curse. But when things come back and it's like, does this align with your higher self? Does this align with who you are? That's when it's really challenging. And I think especially for that hurt inner child, and we're looking into like childhood trauma and abandonment wounds and all of that stuff, that it's taking all of that information, not losing who you are, but choosing to step into the highest version of yourself and that most powerful, authentic version of you that you can be while still keeping all those parts.
Yeah, exactly. Taking the inner children along in a different way, in an integrated way, instead of letting them kind of take the wheel.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Completely you wouldn't put a toddler behind the wheel of a Buick. Yeah. And yet we're doing that, we're subconsciously doing that.
We are.
And be like, I'm functional. I'm holding a job. I'm operating heavy machinery. Yep. And yet a lot of the time there's a kid behind the controls in some way, especially for us trauma survivors. By the way, my name is Liz Zamorski. I'm the guest on the show today. You can find me on Instagram at the Femme Genius. I'm a professional psychic. I'm a lawyer to a light worker.
That's I love it.
And I'm the chief happiness officer of my own company in my life.
I love it. I love it all.
We got that out of the way.
I know.
I was like,
we can jump back into why we're here, or we can just talk all of the woo woo and the healing forever. Like, I'm down for that. Yeah. People who are here, this audience, they're down for that, Well,
so I'll say that this is really cool. I'm gonna let you in on a little thing.
Yeah.
So I had my spiritual awakening in the more, mature sense or intentional sense.
Yeah.
We'll find a good word for it and then you can just edit this out. But I had my big spiritual awakening at the end of 2018. So it was not that long ago. It was 4 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
And I was living on this island in Sweden. I wasn't able to work because my visa hadn't come through, and I was walking in the woods every single day by myself. And I just started really unraveling a lot of who I was and really going into what had caused my diagnosis of CPTSD 22 years ago.
Yeah.
And then how I've been living since then, and just really trying to move forward with my life on this healing journey, going to different therapists and, trying to work with grief counselors and trauma counselors. And it just, nothing really felt like it worked.
Yes.
And then I found this thing called nature. Have you heard of it?
Whoa. You mean research-based nature that actually can assist in healing? Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird.
I know. Right?
I found nature.
Amazing.
And I started saying to myself, like, being in these woods, it was like being in a cathedral. It felt like hallowed ground. It felt like somewhere where something holy was happening, and I got to be part of it. And then I started, reading up on things, seeing like, what does this mean? Who's this blue 8-legged deity that popped in my head yesterday? Oh, that's Kali. Oh, she's going to come in and pull all this bad energy out of me so I can step into my power. Okay. Like, what if I just believe that? What if I just go there for a little bit and see how that feels? And letting that evolve into all kinds of different, spiritual modalities and practices, schools of thought. I got really nerdy with it, going into different types of philosophy, anatomy, just really loving how deep it goes beyond cards and crystals and, the more commodified versions of spirituality that we see.
Yeah.
And I really landed in tarot cards. Like, I didn't set out to be a tarot reader. I wasn't really sure where I was going with it. And when I picked up the tarot, it was like I could hear the voice of my subconscious so clearly.
That's exactly my experience. Yes. And you know what's even funnier? I have not my entire life been able to shuffle cards. Like, it was just like that, like all haphazard, like things are flying everywhere. The moment I had the intention and like the whisper to start doing tarot, I could just shuffle really well. I was like, what? It was super interesting. But yeah, I did the same thing. Like, for me, I kind of think of, so a little bit of my past as well. I don't know if you've experienced this, but like, so I grew up in a family who, my biological father is an overt narcissist, been told by multiple therapists, and I've definitely seen everything. And also the type of person who thinks that Harry Potter is evil and witches are miserable. And if you think anything like that, you are a devil child. So I'm sure they probably love where I'm at now. Heyo. However, so because of that, I suppressed so much of that, because honestly, I would say, and like, I don't like using this word because I'm like, oh, people are going to judge me. I have been psychic since a very young age. I grew up next door to a Satan worshiper, and I saw things and I heard things, like the type of oddness where like all they wore was like a black cloak from head to toe or dark purple. They had a million cats, realizing maybe that's why I don't love cats, and just like creepy, weird, ominous. When they moved out, they found like etchings, all kinds of things. So I was just told that like, we don't, that's what you are if you believe in any kind of spirituality, right?
Yeah.
And so I would have dreams where I would like be connecting with things, and I've always like kind of had like this inner knowing of what was going to happen. I saw my future, like even as a young child. And because I grew up with a narcissist, they saw that and they just kept dimming my light and criticizing, and oh, you're crazy, and oh, this. So I just suppressed. And I was the kid who wanted to go pick up different rocks and put together like, sticks and rocks. And I would make it look like, where I was like a spell or whatever. I don't necessarily do that now. However, it was like, I was always really interested in that. And it was a natural tendency. And I suppressed that. And so it was interesting stepping into my spirituality and owning those things. And like, what's really interesting to me is I still find my ego being like, that's too out there. We're not going to like these deities and all these, like, you're not going to do anything like that. You can just stick with tarot. You can just stick with crystals. You can just stick with understanding the stars. Like, you have these gifts and you always have, and you can step into it in this way. But this is too much for you and your ego right now, and that's okay. But it's just very interesting because my spiritual awakening has been getting in tune with my intuition and not suppressing these things about me anymore. Maybe going about them a different way, because we know sometimes in different contexts that, not everyone can hold your gifts. Let's be honest.
Right.
But the more I've been healing, the more my inner voice, and I would say like my higher self, I'm able to connect. And I'm like getting out of all of this conditioning that you're crazy, you need to keep yourself small, anything like this. And I'm leaning into it more. And I'm doing things so differently. I'm taking big risks. I'm walking away from job. I'm walking away from relationships that I thought were going to be forever things. Like I don't have any connection with my family because I know that's not what is supposed to be happening right now and what's good for me. You know what I mean? And like people looking at me are like, this girl is probably so unstable. However, I'm the happiest that I've ever been because I'm listening to my heart and I'm listening to my intuition. And it's because I've been able to introduce those things along my healing journey. And spirituality is just a self-healing journey to recognizing who you are and where you fit in this universe. So, I love that you're like, yeah, I went through this awakening and yeah, I found myself in tarot, but really from tarot has just been the actual physical evidence that I needed for a while of what my intuition is saying. Cause I hear things before sometimes the cards even pop up, it's like, I know what's coming through. This is just proof for me that I'm not crazy. And that's something that I need sometimes, being raised by a narcissist and being gaslit my entire life. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting. I love that you talk so much about tarot because it really is. It's like proof of what you're feeling.
Like, and I 100% agree with everything you're saying. And the way that you described that part of your childhood and who you were raised by, I didn't grow up next to a Satan worshiper. However, there was a lot of religious guilt and shame that was put on us. And I grew up in the 80s. And so that was the era of Pee-wee's Playhouse and the Care Bears and Rainbow Bright. And all of those were satanic in the eyes of my father, like those kind of things. Yeah. And because there was this big satanic panic back then, but at the same time, it was like basically anything that was fun, or joyful or showed like light and shadow, it was considered evil. But so I grew up in a similar situation with a similar narcissist and similar religious upbringing. Ours was Catholic, so we were very strict Catholic.
Yeah.
And, as a kid, and I think also one thing I wanted to say before I tell that story was it's so interesting to me how many trauma survivors end up becoming psychic or going into spirituality as they get older.
Yes.
Not only as a tool for healing, but it's also like we from so young had to stay so open and aware and alert. And I, really scan every room, be very intuitive and then watching how our gifts have developed as adults. And I'm the type of person where like I would hear a tone shift and I knew like,
Yes.
armor
Yes.
up, armor up. And as I've really explored my psychic gifts, I think everyone has a little bit of everything, being able to kind of see something in their mind or smell something or feel something with their body or just know something. But I've noticed that my clairaudience, being able to hear energy,
Yes, me too.
yeah, is really probably the keenest one. Because when I'm doing a reading, I say a lot, I feel or I hear. And
wow, we're the same. So
yeah.
just blowing my mind. Yeah.
And I wonder, I love playing with these energies and like asking these kind of questions and staying curious. And it's like, I wonder if that was a gift that I had as a child, was that clairaudience. And that's why I noticed the tone shift. Or if my clairaudience developed so much because of having to be aware in that way, but isn't it so interesting to see? And I wonder if, people who would like feel a feeling in the pit of their stomach that something was going to happen, like maybe they're more sentient, clear feeling.
Yep.
So it's just interesting, like when I talk with other trauma survivors and I hear, how they've always had a gift. I was someone who saw a lot of things when I was a kid. When I was 12, I took my babysitting money because I babysat. And I had $20 in this little purse of mine. And I went into this little vintage store. We lived in Princeton, New Jersey. So cute college town. I went to this vintage store and they had this tarot deck that was Art Deco, or like, I guess it was Belle Epoque, because it was a French deck. It was all written in French. I didn't speak French. And it was exactly $20. And I was like, I don't have money for the tax. And she was like, I won't charge you tax. So like, we didn't even exchange with the cards and the 20. And I knew that I needed to hide the cards. So I put them in the back of my underwear drawer. And I was like, no one will find them here. And a couple weeks later, I was home alone and I opened because I was like, I had to make sure that nobody would catch me with it.
Yeah.
And I opened my underwear drawer and I went to take the cards out and they were gone. And I found out later, because I had to admit to my mom that I had bought them.
Yeah.
And then she said, well, your dad found them when he was searching your room, because we would have like room and backpack searches unbeknownst to us. So we didn't even know. Yeah. So so it was like
privacy.
Oh, yeah. Boundaries. And that, can you imagine? Well, I don't want you to, but it's like,
no. Yeah. I get it.
So he found them and then they ripped them into like small pieces and they were like, we have to destroy them. It wasn't enough to like,
oh my
just throw them out. Like they had to destroy them. And I was like, oh. When I was 15 and 16, I would have sleep paralysis and like wake up and I would sense things in my bedroom and sometimes hear them talking. And, the room was really cold. I could feel the fear in my body.
Yep.
And I was told that if it happened one more time, that they were calling a priest because they thought I was possessed. So I basically had to live through years of not knowing how to control that. And just like lay in my bed and experience it because I was too scared to cry out, because I was afraid they would like take me to a priest. So like, I really pushed it so far down.
That's exactly what I did. I blocked it it's interesting because you like had that communication with your parents and being like, hey, like they're recognizing early on, and, they're like taking things and, like they're making sure like you don't get into this. For me, it was always an understanding of, I'm not even going to attempt, like, I'm just going to push this down because this is scary and this is whatever. And like, I remember getting such heavy headaches because I was like, I could tell things were trying to come through. I was like, I don't understand it. This is scary, whatever. No one understands. And like, I don't want to be seen as crazy. So I just blocked. And it was, I think probably by the time I was early 20s, in college, where I finally was just like, I'm going to stop blocking so much. And my headache started going away. And I was like, oh, okay. It isn't as scary as I felt, but like I had the sleep paralysis too, that I would have dreams of in the dreams, like attempting like for things, attempting to connect with me. Right. And then when I woke up, I would feel things. Another thing. So I think this is one of the times in my early 20s. I had someone who was considered like a grandfather to me. And it was like my senior year of college. And I knew that he was sick. However, I didn't know when he was passing or anything like that. And I got this feeling. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning and I was asleep. And all of a sudden I shot straight awake and like sat straight up, eyes wide open. And I was like, who? And I felt something with me. But this was the first time that it didn't feel scary. And I was like, it was a very comforting presence. And it was almost like something was sitting with me. My body felt really warm. And I was just like, okay. And I kind of had this feeling and I was like, this is my grandpa. This is my grandpa. And then after a few minutes of sitting there and feeling like this heaviness of like, it almost felt like, okay, I have to go now. And then went away. And I was like, okay. And I went back to sleep and I ended up calling the family the next morning after we like woke up and it was like 8 o'clock. I was on my way to college. I think it was like finals week. And I was like, hey, is everything okay with grandpa? And they just got really silent. They're like, what do you know? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't really know anything. I'm like, but I think he just passed last night and he visited me before he died. And they were like, we weren't going to tell you because it was finals week, but yeah, he died last night. And I was like, do you know when? She's like, yeah, around like 3 a.m. And I was like, uh, and so it's like when you have so much evidence that this is real, it's like you can't dispute it, like I also like my bachelor's was in science. Like I was a biology degree. I was like the science and we go through the scientific process and the reasoning and all of this stuff. And it's like, I find so much that like science and spirituality and psychology all go together. They really do. Yeah. And like, we were talking about this when we were planning this podcast, was even like, when you look back at things like mindfulness used to be considered super woo-woo. We don't go there. That's for the hippies, right? Now we have evidence that it actually changes your brain in the same areas that are impacted by trauma. So when we think about all of these things like spirituality, we're talking about like energy healing and all this body work and crystals and all of this stuff. I really think that give us 10 years, if we start researching this and we have some evidence, it's going to be evidence-based trauma research.
Yeah,
truly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I talk about this a lot where even the act of giving a reading for me, it reinforces so much of my healing because I have to set really strict energetic boundaries for myself beforehand. Yes. I set strict energetic boundaries with the person I'm reading for. Mm-hmm. I make sure that I'm opening my energy in very intentional ways where I have specific intentions and I'm like, this is the information I want. This is who I want to work with. Everything else needs to leave. And then at the end, closing the energetic connection, closing my energy, making sure everything goes back, that it's grounded. And just the act of doing that, of intentionally setting boundaries and getting comfortable doing it, creating an energetic template for yourself or creating a template for yourself to say, oh, that's how easy it is for me to set boundaries. For so many of us who were never taught that. And when we set boundaries as adults, it feels aggressive. It does really uncomfortable. So teaching ourselves this very innocuous way that takes the edge off of it, like, oh, I'm just opening my energy and closing my energy and setting intentions. Well, that's setting boundaries. You did it. Congratulations. So, and when you're doing it over and over and creating a practice out of that, even if you do nothing in between, even if you don't do a reading, you don't do, just doing that practice of setting intentions, opening your energy, closing it, bringing back your energy and cutting cords. It's so helpful to trauma survivors. And I could see that being, that simple act. It sounds very similar to me as like the mindfulness track, where I think people are going to really start noticing soon that this is going to help with a lot of codependency and people pleasing and recovery, is really being able to set boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. And even so, let's thinking from a brain perspective. I love that you brought that up because when we're thinking about setting intentions, basically, so Harvard has recently come out with some new information that 93% of our decisions are coming from the subconscious mind. meaning below the conscious level, based on our, what I like to call like the computer program that's been programmed since we were a child, right? And 95% of this is programmed by the time we're 18. So much of how we act as adults is influenced by how we were when we were younger. Most of that is by the time we're 7, it's like 80 something percent, if I remember correctly.
So, by the way, 17 years before the brain's fully formed, but back to you. Like, but exactly.
Oh my gosh, right? It's like, okay, so here, this is the way that the human body wants to work. Here, we'll tell you how to run everything before you can think. Okay, awesome. Like what?
My uncle always said 7 was the age of reason. So like any child in our family or extended family who reached the age of 7, he's like, you're at the age of reason now. And it's like, but it is that magic number of like, there's something that does fully form that's recognized and that's been recognized for a long time. Like something is fully formed by the time you're 7. Yeah. And you're running on that program for a long ass time.
Yeah. And like, you think about it, like, and okay. So even from like, oh, I'm going to nerd out here. Okay. So my occupational therapy brain is coming in. So like looking at the brain perspective, you are taking in information so much at that young of an age by sensory information alone. Okay. Mimicking the sights, the sounds, the whatever. You're not able to reason through these things. Okay. Like you're just making decisions based on your environment, because you can't, like you said, we don't have that logic brain or very much access to that. Okay. So if mom and dad are not playing with me, that must mean that I did something bad, or I'm horrible, or I'm in trouble, or they don't love me. And so we store that as a belief that I'm not good enough, instead of now looking back when we're older and being like, oh, they were busy with work. Okay. But in our brain, we're acting like no one loves me. No one wants to play with me. I'm so weird. And then if you get into abuse in that time, then even more so those negative beliefs are going to kind of show up that way. Right. And so it's interesting to me that like our subconscious brain controls so much of what we do. And when I totally forgot what we were even talking about. I forgot my point, but when we're moving forward, it's really learning how to, intention setting. That was it. When we're setting intentions, we're taking our subconscious and we're moving it to the conscious. So we're going from this 93% of the brain and we're saying, okay, so I'm on autopilot all the time based on things that happened in my childhood, based on how I perceived things that were probably incorrect, because let's be honest, my brain wasn't fully formed. Like you said, like 18 years before my brain actually knows what it's doing and can help me be like a fully functioning human. Okay. So at this point, setting energy boundaries and setting an intention is genuinely just taking what you want to happen instead of having this automatic brain to say, okay, consciously, this is what we're focusing on. You're telling the program, hey, we're going to work towards this. I know that you want to go in this pattern, but this is not what we're doing today. Question for you. What intention? So if you look, what intention did you set for this recording? If you're thinking about it, I did one subconsciously and I didn't recognize it.
I asked the spirit to move through me. Love that. That was the intention that I set. Was I was like, I'm going to let the spirit move through me, because when I set that specific intention, there's a context to it where that means like whatever we're supposed to experience and whatever the people who will be listening are supposed to experience or receive from it. Mm-hmm. Like I'm letting spirit move through me to deliver that message.
Yes.
So, you know, we can talk about underwater basket weaving, and I'm like, somebody needed to hear it. So
that's it. Oh my gosh. So I'm like, whatever message needs to come through comes through. And I also realized there was this underlying subconscious of helping people step into their personal power and breaking some stigmas. And what's really funny is we literally just talked about this. I am wearing my yellow power pants here, and you are wearing your yellow shirt, which is all about that solar plexus, which is helping people step into that personal power and tapping into that. And I'm like, that just happened. We did that subconsciously together.
Yeah. It's super cool.
Like what?
I got to hop back to what you were just saying though.
Yes, okay. Sorry.
I love
squirrel brain.
No. I love this moment, but this is my squirrel brain too, being like, I have something to respond to too.
Go for it.
So speaking of all this, it's really interesting too, because like what you're talking about with setting the intention is basically overriding the programming. Absolutely 100%. Mm-hmm. What's also really interesting to do is when you talk about that birth to 7 years span of time, and when you talk about it's very sensory, we're really in our senses. We're not in our logic. We're receiving raw data.
Yep.
We're making sensory judgments on it.
Yep.
And putting things in two piles at the most rudimentary level, which is this will help me survive or this could kill me, right? Like, because your brain is really in that survival mode, especially like you said, when you add abuse into the mix. So as I've been on this more intentional spiritual journey now, for the past 4 years, one thing that I've really come into doing is engaging myself in sensory play and allowing myself to have, again, boundaried periods of time where I'm engaging in sensory play. And I'm not intentionally doing it to give my inner child an outlet, but I've come to know that that's what I'm doing. So I'm overriding the programming when that's appropriate. And then I'm also building in time to have appropriate time with my inner child, or giving my inner child appropriate times to come out. So then there's not this, grabbing of the wheel as we're trying to move forward.
Yep.
And that can take on so many, that sensory play, it can take on so many different manifestations. It can be being in nature and letting yourself go, oh, that's cool. That cloud looks like a crocodile.
Yep.
It can look like painting, collaging, dancing. We've talked about dance too. I know that you do that a lot. Playing with cards, playing with whatever, reading, writing.
Animals are huge for me. That's the first thing that helps me connect to that aspect of myself.
Yeah.
And like when you're talking about play too, it's not only important for inner child, but like mobilization. Like, so when we're as survivors, for a lot of us, we grew up kind of in this immobilized state in our nervous system of it's not safe. I'm either people pleasing most of the time, right? I'm in this, or I'm frozen, I'm dissociating. I'm not really here if we're in this like chronic environment of stress. So immobilization is one of the neural pathways, but also we have mobilization. And when we're in more of like the survival mode, when we get to mobilization, when there's more of a threat and we feel like we need to move, that is the fight or flight. But on the safe neural pathway, play is the need for mobilization. And it's really interesting because it can be play, sensuality, and actually immobilization is actually being able to rest and recuperate, not just freeze, but rest and recuperate. And so I find it really interesting that you intuitively know, hey, I need to play, because whether you recognized or not, you were also changing the neural pathway from I'm not safe to this is a way that I can access a need in a safe way and in a fun way while nurturing my inner child, but also rewiring my nervous system in a need that within safety. And that's powerful when you look at just from like the nervous system standpoint, is it's not just your inner child. Like that's why it's like people think like inner child is more of like a spiritual term, which it can be. However, it overlaps so much with healing, so much with psychology. I think of EMDR. Have you ever done EMDR therapy?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much visualization, and it's really interesting to me because so much of EMDR therapy overlaps with what I believe in spirituality.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are these not connected yet? How is the stigma still here? Because literally we're looking at the science of the brain and the nervous system and all this visualization, all of these things that we use for healing anyways, just putting it in a different lens. And people are like, oh no, we're pushing that away. We don't understand that. But it's really what people do. Throw in a card, throw in crystals or whatever. And people are like, oh, no. But really, it's just connection to your true self. You're working through your subconscious, bringing it to conscious awareness and working through the stuff. That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's really all it is.
It's all it is. And like you were saying, it's rewiring your neural pathways. It's rewiring your nervous system to not just seek safety, but to know that it can create safety.
Yes.
And like that, for me, so much of working with the tarot, working with cards, working with crystals, it's really to validate my own path, my own creative path.
Yep.
What I'm doing, where you talked about, you don't even have to pull the card and you already know.
Yep.
You already know. And then when the cards come out, it's confirmation.
Yeah.
And we can call that the power of suggestion. We can call it whatever, but I'm like, does it make you feel good? Is it hurting anyone? If the answer is yes and no there, then why not?
Yeah.
And trust me that I really went through a lot of trauma healing, especially around my spiritual awakening, because it did bring up this is evil. You're going to lose your whole family.
Yep.
You're going to, I got really scared. And then a lot of people did go no contact. A lot of, when I finally started coming out, I was a corporate lawyer. I worked for boutique law firms in Dubai doing cross-border mergers and acquisitions.
Wow.
I was a white collar criminal defense attorney in Dubai. Wow. I was ticking a lot of boxes for a lot of other people. I could be the person that my parents told other people, oh, our daughter's a lawyer. Like I realized in hindsight that was a gift for them.
Yep.
For me to say, like, is this good? Am I good enough now? Is this good enough now?
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It wasn't.
It never will be. It never will be.
Ever. And when I started my spiritual awakening, I got really scared. And I got a job as an in-house counsel for a software company where we live so fast, your head would spin. Like, I got a job so fast because I was like, I can't be left up to my own devices. I didn't know that this is what I was doing at the time.
Yep.
But I was just like, I can't be left to my own devices. I need to go get a job. And it became physically painful going to work. Talk about when you were talking about the headaches, like, and I tried to say that to someone who was close to me. I said, it's physically painful for me to go to this office. And they were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And
I just went, oh, I can't, because my husband wasn't on the path yet. We always say, we joke, like, he's about 6 months behind me in his evolution.
I love that.
But those first 6 months, I mean, that I felt like I might've been going crazy. I felt like I was having a breakdown.
Gosh,
yeah. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, oh my gosh, I see things so clearly now, and they're all so messed up. I was like, I got to do something.
My whole life has been a lie. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Been there.
Yeah. And my husband, bless his heart, he was so supportive, but he was like, I don't really get it, but like, okay, I'm here for you. I support you. And as this had evolved, so I worked at that place for 16 months, somehow on fumes the whole time. I mean, somehow. And I left right when COVID started. So my last day was April 19th of 2020. And I'd put in my month's notice a month before that. So like right when everybody was starting to go home and everything.
Yep.
And I thought like, oh, if I work from home, it'll be a better environment. I'll be able to do better because I know I feel good at home. And it was maybe a week of working from home. And I was like, oh no, it wasn't the environment. Like I'm not supposed to do this.
Yep.
And, but I was so lucky that I had such support with my partner, with my husband, feeling like he didn't fully understand it, but he was like, I can still support you in what you're doing. And, I was in a position where I could leave, but I was so used to him just really being there and listening and like understanding and, helping. as I was going through this darkness and like trying to find the light switch and just knowing like, I just need to keep, I don't know where this is going. I don't know what's happening. But I know I got to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
There's just something in me saying like, I just got to keep moving forward. And the good, the bad, and the ugly truths that I was facing about myself, my past, who I was, who I thought I was, who had put ideas in my head that just weren't true anymore.
Yep.
Working through all of that. I did have a therapist at the time who is just an angel on earth, but you know, I was just so used to being able to be vulnerable in that way. So then when I told this friend, like, it's physically difficult for me to go work there, they were like, what are you talking about? And I just went like, oh, oops. Like
I shouldn't have said that.
I shouldn't say these things. Like, people don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean,
they don't.
It was tough. And I still to this day, you know, like, only a few months ago did my father acknowledge that he knew about my business. And the way he found out about it was because in a dysfunctional family, people get rewarded for gossiping about one another behind their backs.
Yeah, they do.
Right? And I tapped out of that game a long time ago. Never looked back. But that's still the way that people are given attention and rewarded in my family of origin.
Yep.
And so my father had found out about my business through a sibling of mine, basically betraying my trust, you know, going out of their way to say, well, do you know what Liz is doing? And it was devastating.
Yeah.
Because that opened the line. It gave abusers in my life a reason to get in contact with me after I hadn't been in contact with them for a while. Financial abuse coming into the picture, you know, threatening like to be like written out of the family, these kind of things. Like, I don't have financial support from my family, but, you know, basically like, you're dead to me, you're not in my will. And those kind where I was like, really? Like, that's what you got. That's what you got. Okay. And me trying to say like, this isn't about money for me, and being told like, of course it is, you're being entitled and you think that you can just, you know, I'm almost 41 years old.
The logic there. I'm like, where's the logic?
Right?
I'm thinking my brain is just like, really?
Yeah. And you know, as an abuse survivor, that there's so much code, that so much subtext, so much code, that there is no logic.
No, it's just manipulation tactics. It's just I mean, I don't even think they do it consciously anymore. I think they're just wired for manipulation. And anything I can do to not put this on, or to make it look like a reflection, you're a reflection of me. That's one of the ones that I've seen. I'm like, that's what kept me the way I needed to be for so long. Like, keep you in this box. This is acceptable. This is not acceptable. Right. But also like, I'm not going to take any accountability for my behavior. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to punish you for doing something different. Yeah. And that's such a very common thing in like the toxic family dynamic, that, you know, especially the ones who have been the scapegoats. Like, you get that a lot. Like, you're punished for going against what we say, like, oh, this is a family matter. Oh, you said something to someone else. Oh, you're going to be exiled. Like, oh, you're not doing what I want you to do. You're not under my control anymore. Oh, well, I'm going to throw my little temper tantrum in my way and try and find ways to seek control or get you to come back to me. No.
Yeah. Not happening.
No.
And it is so empowering to go through, I'll say, especially the healing journey, but to go through things like the spiritual awakening, or to start exploring with your spirituality, because it is so personal. I talk a lot about free will with a lot of my clients, where I say, you know, first of all, anything I say here is just information. It's intuitive information that I'm bringing through, but you have free will. So if you don't like the way something sounds, like, you have the free will to change that. If you do like the way something sounds, use that as a springboard to set more purposeful intentions around that type of energy. When we were talking before about the full moon energy, I love saying things like, listen, even if this is totally bogus, okay? Like, even if all the planetary astrology stuff, let's just say, all of this is totally bogus. However, there are enough people globally who are believing it and who are speaking this language and thinking this way and living with the intention of this, that you can't deny that people behave differently when there's a full moon or when there's a Mercury retrograde or when there is a collective subconscious or a collective consciousness that is responding to a large set of beliefs. This is how we had the Holy Roman Empire. This is how we had, wars around religions. This is how we have ley lines. This is how we have sacred sites. Enough people are believing the same thought that it can change the energy of a place, a thing, an idea, a moment in time.
Yeah.
I think that's so fascinating, where I'm like, you don't have to believe it. Look around you. When I gave birth, when I gave birth 8 years ago, my daughter was, her due date was supposed to be December 1st. And it was my first pregnancy. On November 18th, I went into labor. And my husband was kind of like, are you sure? And I was like, I'm not really sure. We did hypnobirthing, so I wasn't exactly sure, if I was in full labor or not. And we went to the ER because it turned out I was in labor, and they were like, the ward is totally full. And the midwives said, it's a full moon tonight. And I was like, what? I thought they were crazy. I was like, what are they talking about? They found us a bed, but they were like, we're totally full. There's so many people having babies tonight. And like, my own baby was born almost 2 weeks early because like, she was ready to come, she was ready to be a Scorpio. She was ready to come under the full moon. And like, it was so funny because when I went through my spiritual awakening, it was one of those moments where I went, oh my gosh, I think they were right.
Anyone who works with kids or in healthcare will tell you, even if you don't believe in anything else, it's a full moon. Even if consciously you're not paying attention to it, you can tell by people's behavior. You can look at like the emergency room, all of the people, like the energy is chaotic. People are explosive. It's always the people too that suppress their emotions, that aren't in tune with them, that it just comes out just like wild. And like the number of like accidents those days. And like, it's just, I can't even tell you how many breakups I have had on full moons.
Well, and I wonder if part of it is like, okay, let's just play with this. Let's nerd out here for a second.
Let's do it.
For so long before electricity, in the ancient world, the full moon really was magical because they would have the big bacchanal every full moon. And like, that's when people would get pregnant because the women would be ovulating and people would be out partying and drinking all night because they actually had light to do it by. And they'd be dancing and they'd be, having feasts to pagan gods and goddesses. And, Diana, the goddess of the hunt, was really revered under the full moon because they could hunt under the full moon. There was just, the reason that we blow out birthday candles on cakes is because it was a full moon cake that was made. And then they would put candles on it. You would make a wish and blow out the candles. And then they believed that the smoke took the wish up to the gods in the heavens.
That's cool.
Like, so cool. There's so much history and folklore around full moons. And so even if let's just say, even if there was no biological reason otherwise, like in the environment of why people get chaotic, I'm wondering too, if it's one of those kind of human ancestral, it's in your bones that like, when there's a full moon, it's time to get wild. But like,
maybe
it's time to, it's party time and people, but I also believe that there is a difference in there's science behind it. But
I think too, if we know that the moon can impact the tides, right, in an ocean, if the moon can change the way that the ocean is, and we're like 70 something percent water, why do we think that it can't impact the way that we behave? Like, really, let's, if you break that down in a science way, like that's always my biggest argument. I'm like, we know that the moon's energy, and based on where things are, changes the way that the ocean moves. So why would we be any different when we're so much water,
salty and watery?
Like, why? You know what I mean?
It's
funny.
No, exactly. And I'm with you, and just taking it back again, like I'm with you where I think that science and biology and technology is moving at a fast enough pace now that, yeah, within the next 10 years, I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely think there's going to be a lot more
Yep.
evidence-based theories around intuition and spirituality, and where they're really going to be saying like, oh, we've figured out now
And
that the moon
collective
really does,
consciousness.
yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
it does this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm with you. We'll put the 10-year date on it. So
Down.
in September of 2032, we'll have to have this conversation again and be like, do you see? We predicted
See,
it.
we were right. We're not the crazy ones, y'all.
We're normal.
We were ahead of our time. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And you know what? I've been thinking about this too. And I'm like, I want to circle back a little bit to what you were saying about alignment when things felt physically painful. And this is
Mhm.
one of my biggest passions. And so much of the reason that this platform exists is not only for survivors to know that, so many of us were silenced. So many of us were like, oh, the gaslighting is huge. And it basically takes you away from yourself, takes you away from who you are, knowing your identity. A lot of us are either chameleons or we suppress so many things that you don't even know who you are. It's one of the
Yeah.
biggest impacts of trauma, especially early on, is not knowing who you are. And
Yeah.
so when you do kind of have this awakening, whether someone wants to call it a spiritual awakening or not, there's a period in everyone's life at some point where you hit a rock bottom or some kind of thing where you're like, things need to shift. Whether you
Mhm.
wanted to decide that's spiritual or not, there is something that happens in everyone's life, whether that is the abuse that you've dealt or with, or, waking up and seeing family patterns, or, whatever it may be. Once you realize what is happening and how much has not been in what we would call alignment with who you are, you're starting to recognize, well, I don't know who I am, but this doesn't feel right. That's the first step to figuring out who you are, where you want to go, what you want to be, because you're starting to listen to your soul. And the first thing you're going to recognize is what isn't right. And what's interesting is the more you recognize it, and if you don't shift it, the louder it gets. And
Yes.
it does turn into that physical pain. It does, you know what I mean? Like I fought it for so long. I am not supposed to be in a traditional job. I have a
Yeah.
doctor of occupational therapy degree. Okay. I walked away from, I'm great with kids. I love what I do there. I love working with kids, but the one-to-one over and over, 9 to 5, that's not how my brain works.
Mm-mm.
Like trauma
Yeah.
brain, whatever, like that's not how I work. And I've always wanted to be a teacher since I was really, really little. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I was thinking like, I'm going to be in a traditional classroom. The more that I have been leaning into myself, I've been recognizing that it's stuff like this. It's being
Yeah.
on stages and sharing about trauma and healing and growth and finding yourself and how to do those kind of things. Right. And so every time I'd be like, oh, okay, so there were phenomenons in my life where I would go to companies that I knew about for a long time. And I have had people, connections in that company who've been like, this is an amazing place to work. Like there's, nothing like it. There's just this really awesome, amazing atmosphere and everyone gets along. And I would go there. And within a few months, things started unraveling at the seams. And I'm like, what? And I would immediately start seeing the dysfunction. And then other people around me would start seeing this dysfunction, and people would leave in waves who have been there for
Yeah.
years. And I'm like, what? And I remember
Yeah.
going to, before I was in touch with any kind of my psychic gifts or even wanted to recognize that I had my own personal power in that way, I would go to who I called her like a spiritual guidance counselor once a year. And I remember going to her and I'm like, what is this phenomenon? I know, like, since I was 12 years old, I wanted to be an occupational therapist. Why am I going into these traditional jobs being told that it's great? And then all of a sudden things start unraveling. It's like, because you're seeing dysfunction in systems, you're meant to see the dysfunction in systems because you're going to be the one to help change them. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is years ago. And I'm like, whatever. And I look back, what am I working on? Trauma sensitive care. I want to train programs, help with program development, with training and how to work through in ways that are trauma sensitive, not only for clients, but for group programming. And that is so much of my purpose. And so every time I would go into a typical job, I would see something else that came out and I was like, oh, And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to go to this next one. And the same thing happened. And I'm like, what? It was like this shift in management. And then they started getting really focused on money, or they started getting into these like scarcity and survival modes and running a company that way. And I'm like, why is this happening? I've been in contact with this company. I know they've always been amazing. And I have people on the inside saying the same thing. People after a decade who have left just in this shift. And I'm like, so I had this phenomenon where every single time I tried to get into a traditional job, this would happen and something would lead me to where it's like, you need to leave. And I'm like, I'm making good money. What do you, I'm like, hi, I have to pay bills. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so, but I couldn't go against that intuition. Like I had to go into that job to figure out what was dysfunctional. And I realized every single time I did, it informed something I'm doing now.
Yep.
But I couldn't ignore it. And every single time I walked away from a stable job where I'm probably making like $80,000 a year to go into a platform of survivors, take risks on contracts that are fleeting, moving in and out, but it's soul work and just trusting and knowing that it's going to be okay. I've had cents in my bank account. Like I had 16 cents when I quit my job, and was like, I don't even like, at one point it was like, I was hopping around. I didn't have a house. Like everything at once shifted so freaking fast to bring me back to this. And everyone around me is like, you're crazy, right? You're like, what? And I'm like, but I cannot ignore what's happening, because only I know the patterns happening in my life. Only I know the physical things around me that are falling apart when I'm not listening. It's putting you on this path to yourself and what you're supposed to be doing. And it can be really hard when you're not the one actually feeling it. But what's amazing is like, even when I look around and I'm like, I'm physically in a very different spot, financially in a very different spot. However, I am the most fulfilled that I've been in so long because I'm listening to my heart. And also I know that's shifting soon. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't explain it. But, and people always ask, like, you're glowing. What's going on? I'm like, I'm finding myself and I'm listening to myself and I'm aligned with where I need to be.
Yeah.
Like that's, and so if anyone is feeling like that, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I just feel like that was supposed to come through, that like, if anyone is feeling like that's not what society thinks I should do, I don't know, there's like, things don't feel right, there's physical pain or whatever it may be, listen to you. That's ultimate fulfillment and happiness, is when you start listening to yourself and knowing that you can trust yourself and you've got yourself no matter what. Because guess what? Things could go wrong, or they could go really, really right.
Yeah.
Really, really right.
And the way that they go right is going to be beyond your wildest dreams, because you can't anticipate it. I tell people a lot of the time, to think about, for instance, if they're married, like how you met your spouse. And if you try to go back through, well, we met at a restaurant, but then there's always but the reason I was at the restaurant was because and there's always like a longer thing. And it's like, if you actually kind of reverse engineer any good thing in your life, anything that you really cherish or value, especially when it has to do with other people, but opportunities, relationships, conversations you've had, to try to say like how you were in that place at that time and for that reason, or for that purpose. When you try to reverse engineer it, you see how many miracles had to have, or how many chance things had to kind of fall into place. And it'll take you all the way back to the day you were born, if you go far enough back.
Yeah.
And so, when you look at life in that way, now flip it around and say like, there's no way that you can predict how many chance meetings or how many days or how many conversations you're going to have to reach your next amazing moment. And so like, leaving room for the magic to come through, leaving room for that uncertainty. And just like you said, staying grounded in, I don't know much, but I know that this one thing or this number of things is true for me. And like you said before, where when you haven't been able to develop your own identity your whole life, when you said, who am I? Like that sent a chill down my spine, because that has been, my repeating question for my whole life. Who am I? I don't know. And when you talked about going from job to job and what your pattern was there, it suddenly popped in my head. Like my pattern was always going in and being the capable one in whatever job I took, and being given a lot of responsibility, uncompensated responsibility that was above my level, that was above my knowledge level, that was above my comfort level, and just taking it on and bearing it. And that was a pattern that happened to me as a survivor, you know, that happened to me as a child, where I was made to be an adult way before I was ready, way before it was even appropriate. And so, you know, looking at that pattern, where when I then found myself in that role again, it was just like, this hurt. I could finally say, this hurts. I can't do this. You know, for the first time in whatever it was, 37 years, I was able to say, like, this, it hurts too. It's physically painful. I can't do this. I have to leave here. It's amazing how it unfolds.
It is. And, you know, again, if we put for the skeptics out there, if you put all of the spiritual components aside, if you put all the stuff that you consider woo-woo, it just comes down to listening to your heart. And the more that you're healing and the more that you're growing, the more you're getting in connection with your true self and your authenticity, right? And then the more that you start living in that, you attract naturally what is meant for you. And I think about, like, if I hadn't owned my spirituality, if I hadn't owned my gifts and stepped in and, like, let my woo-woo flag fly, there is no way that you and I would be having this amazing conversation right now. If I was still hiding, I wouldn't be able to have this powerful conversation on healing and transformation and including spirituality, because I would just be sitting there being like, oh, and thinking about, man, I wish I could understand more about this and connect with these people. But because I was scared to lean into that part of me, I didn't have that around me. And now most of my friends were like, all right, what's going on this week? Like, hey, can you pull some cards for me? I'm feeling a little clouded, so I can't get in touch with my intuition, but, like, hey, what's going on? Like, I will literally have friends be like, what's going on with the moon right now? I'm feeling something. Like, this is my everyday, and I love every bit of it. It just fulfills my inner child so much. But I never would have been able to get there if I didn't listen to my heart. And maybe it's not spirituality for you. That's fine. Whatever it is. Like, if you want to be an actress,
Lord of the Rings. Like, whatever it is.
I don't care.
What's your nerd? Get into your nerd and trust yourself. Like, fully go into it.
Follow your passions.
Exactly. Because your passions are your subconscious saying, hey, come over here. Come check this out. You can keep your focus here for a while. We'll do the magic in the background. Like, this is you taking your power back by saying, I like this thing, and it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. And it probably wouldn't, but I really like it. And again, like, as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, go for it. Because, like you said, it's coming back to your power, your voice, your control over your you-ness, over your being. That has been co-opted your whole life by abusers or by people who are gaslighting you and saying, well, that's not who you are, because that's not who we're going to let you be.
And I think too, like, as we're finding ourselves as adults, I think of it like, so many of us are kind of stuck in this high school mentality before we wake up, right? You have to be a certain thing, like the certain group or the certain clique, or in order to be liked, we have to be like this, right? This is the popular group. This is the nerdy group. This is the group that, like, oh, we're really judgmental about them, whatever it is. And so I just remember so much of high school being like, I need to fit in. I have to be around these people. I have to be able to connect with these people. And it's really interesting because as an adult, no, you don't. Who you're around, where you decide to work, whatever, it's in your control. We were kind of forced to be in high school. We were kind of forced to be around all these people. And it's not going to say that you're not going to be around people that you don't get along with or that aren't your cup of tea. Okay. We still, as humans and adults, have to figure out a way to work with those people. But as far as, like, the connections in your life and the people who you let into your inner circle, you get to choose. It doesn't have to be like that popular cliquey girl that you feel uncomfortable around. It doesn't have to be that. It can be where you feel comfortable. It can be the nerdy people who you realize actually nerds are super cool. And it's like the phenomenon where you think of, like, high school, and it's like the nerdy guy who was really quiet and broody, and, like, everyone was making fun of them. And all of a sudden, as adults, they're just like the emotionally mature, also very somehow super attractive human being now,
Yeah.
where the popular guy has like a beer belly and isn't going anywhere in their life. And like they're, take it out of the high school atmosphere and you're like, oh, I actually have always really connected with this nerdy guy. And whoa, look at them now. Like we're aligned here. You know what I mean? And when you're not worried about what other people think or the status or anything like that, that's when you connect.
Yeah.
We're not in high school anymore. So stop
No.
living like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine tell me a couple weeks ago that they never felt more free than when they were 17. And that blew my mind.
Wow.
Because I understand that that's their truth, and I honor that, and I honor that truth in whomever may hold that belief.
Mm-hmm.
But when I took a moment, because I was like, whoa, that was my reaction just in my mind. Whoa. Because I was so caged in at 17.
Me too.
Yeah. Not just by my family, not just by society, but because I had reinforced the bars from the inside, right? Like, so I was behaving a certain way. I was doing certain things with certain people. I was being this personality for my friend group. I was not being too smart, but not too silly, and like not too funny, but not too dry, just, I was baby bear. I was just right.
Yep.
And I was having to be an adult when I went home. So there was just a lot of restriction that had been built in my life.
Yeah.
And so when I thought back to that, I was like, wow, that is just so far from my experience. And like adulthood, while it's been challenging, figuring this out for myself, going through the pitfalls, having to pick myself back up, saying dumb things, or saying things that got me results that I didn't want at the time, but ended up being for my greatest good. Those lessons that you learn along the way, like I wouldn't trade the past 17 years for those first 17 years for anything. Because it's been so hard, but I've always known and trusted, like I'm developing my experience, I love saying, like, I was really writing a good origin story, adventuring, going out, experiencing life in a really open way. I didn't go to law school until my later 20s. And, so I'd had time of kind of figuring some stuff out even before that.
Yeah.
So like, I just think of how much freedom I feel like I've had since that time. And especially since this awakening, really letting myself own my own language, own my experience, not having to keep myself quiet to legitimize someone else's experience over my own, becoming a world famous psychic, where my family, who still don't acknowledge what I do, they also can't deny it. I'm out there. There's proof. There's people. I have clients, I have a business. This is a legitimate business.
Yeah.
I'm not staying quiet. I'm not hiding in the closet. And so while they don't want it to be true, it is.
And it always has been.
Yeah. And I feel myself still carrying the shame around it. When I talk about them and I'm standing in my power, I can still feel the shame in my body the whole time, even though I'm like, I believe in this. Like, I'm not going to hide my light, but I feel that. And so if there are people who are listening to this who are trying to make sense of both of those truths, they can coexist. You can stand in your power and still also feel the shame. It's about not responding or acting from the shame. That's that shift. That's the awakening, saying this can exist in my body. I hope at one point it won't, but for now, I'm not going to put all my mental energy on that. I'm just going to say, okay, yeah, I feel my insides cringing, but I also know that I have a higher reason for doing this, and that I am helping people and I am helping myself. So yeah, but that inner battle still rages. and then I have to go to speak about, feeling tired and feeling exhaustion. Like when I set out for building my own business, I was also the person who was like, I can't work a 9 to 5. I can't work a 6 to 10, like I can't have that. And when I started building my business, I had hired a business coach, and she said, like, what's your goal? And she was talking about money. And I said, listen, if it was money, I would go back working at a corporate law firm.
Yep.
Like it's easy for me from a place. I understand how privileged it is to be like, well, money is not my initial goal, but of course I want my business to be profitable but to also be helping people. Mm-hmm. And my goal was, I want to work 3 hours a day max. I want to work 3 hours a day and be able to build my business and be able to still do my healing. And she was like, okay, well, let's not put the cart before the horse. Like, you need to actually figure out what it is you're doing before you start setting your hours. And I was like, okay, well, that's not the way I want to do it, because I've done it. I was like, I'm not leaving corporate law to come into another basically corporate dictated environment. Like, that's not why I'm here. So thanks. And I'll say that I've grown a very successful business working 3 hours a day, because that's all I can handle. I need to build in rest, play, time for myself, for my own growth, for my own healing. And I bet there are people out there who are like, I want to work a half an hour a day because that's all my nervous system can take. And I really hope that that's the type of, I see it. And I really hope also that that's the type of paradigm that we're moving toward, where we really look at each person and say, what is it that you bring? What is it? What's your gift? And how long can you stay healthy while also providing your gift? And letting people really be in the way that they want to work, the way that they work best, what they work best with, going back to that kind of global village mentality of each person has a purpose, has a gift.
Yeah.
If we're not commodifying and saying, well, you have this gift, but you also need to feed yourself, right? So we're going to need for you to put that gift aside and just show up and do what we tell you to do. Mm-hmm. I really feel like, especially with all the people taking back their personal power globally, that we are moving to that, where we can really be showing up in our power. And then, all these systems.
Capitalism is finally starting to shift, hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll take a while, but people are recognizing that capitalism is not the best.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't work long-term, and it doesn't work with this many people on the globe.
No.
Like, there's too many people on the globe for capitalism to be it. Mm-hmm. We just can't sustain that.
Nope.
Yeah.
So I know I hear you, and I'm like, people are gonna be mad at us for saying that, but I don't even care. Also, I'm kind of feeling like we should pull some cards. What are you feeling?
Sure.
Does that feel good?
Let's pull some cards. Yeah.
I love
it. Shuffle up.
So are we pulling this for who's listening?
Pulling this for who's listening.
Okay.
And I feel the question that I'm asking is, what do they need to know about the journey?
Love that.
What do they need to know about this journey? Ooh, okay. Is there one more? This is so beautiful. Okay. 7 cards actually want to come out. 7's our magic number.
Wow.
in this podcast, I think. So we've been talking about like birth to 7. We've been talking about.
We have. Wow.
Yeah. They're
amazing.
There's some other 7 energy that was kind of coming through too, which is cool.
That's also good luck. 7s are usually associated with good luck. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mm. So I also associate 7 with expansion. So that could be interesting too. Mm-hmm. But it's so cool because the cards on the table, these 7 it's talking about this journey of the work that we're here to do. And so much of the work that we're here to do is to really do what we've been talking about. It's the drilling down. It's the going back to our core values, our core seeds of self, and then being able to nurture them in a different way in order to achieve different, more favorable outcomes that make sense to us. And I say this because the cards that came out, I'm going to talk about the first 3 cards apparently for right now. I got the 8 of Pentacles,
Mm-hmm.
the
Oh, I love
10
that
of,
deck.
yeah, this is the Light Seers Tarot by Chris Ann, and I always recommend it for new readers, old readers, everyone.
Yep.
It's such an accessible deck.
It's my go-to
So
that I use.
it's so beautiful. I love it. So we got this 8 of Pentacles, the 10 of Cups, and the Page of Swords.
Mm-hmm.
And what this is telling me is that our work is really to go through the full spectrum of emotions in order to come home to ourselves. When we're able to do this, when we're able to trust that our future self, or that our higher self, or whatever you want to call that subconscious part of you that still exists from your core, it's your core self, it's your core being,
Mm-hmm.
that part of you is also guiding you. It's standing with you in your truth and saying, like, just keep putting one foot in front of another. And that as you trust that, it's doing the emotional healing behind the scenes. It's bringing you back to yourself. It's bringing you back to your truth. And it's also going to ignite a whole slew of new ideas. You were talking before about really being in this liminal space where you can feel that there's this big change coming.
Yeah.
And it's like you're already holding that energy. And so even if it wasn't originally going to happen, you holding that belief is really helping you make intentional moves to manifest that in your life.
Yep.
And so this Page of Swords is really saying, like, you hold all the cards. It's within your own power to set the intentions to get yourself on the path you want to be on. It's not waiting for someone else to give you the answer to who am I or why am I here. It's you deciding in every moment, this is who I want to be. This is what I want my life to look like. This is what I want my purpose to be.
Mm-hmm.
You get to decide that. And when you make those bold claims, even if it's not who you're going to be forever, even if it's not what you're going to do forever, just going through the practice of making a bold claim of who you want to be in the world, it's putting you on the road to evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get to a point where that's not going to ring true for you anymore, but you're going to be like, then I get to change. I get to give myself permission to change. I am under no contractual obligation, as far as I know.
I
Yeah.
have chills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are under no contractual obligation to never change.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the people who are end up suing their managers at some point, but that's another story. Or they record Taylor's version of Red. Okay.
Yep.
But most of us are not bound to stay the same, but we've been taught that we are. And so one of the biggest acts of revolution that we can make in our lives for ourselves is to claim, like, I give myself permission to evolve. I give myself permission to learn. I give myself permission to change my mind. What was once a yes gets to someday be a no, and vice versa. I get to change my mind. And so many of us as survivors were taught absolutism, and where when you say something, you better mean it or else.
Yep.
And so it's so healing to allow yourself to be malleable and flexible again, to allow yourself to allow your, get the words out, to allow your experience to change and to allow yourself to change along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first message. Whew. The second one, I feel like this is more about the journey. This is so cool. Okay. The second little message I wanted to give everyone comes in the form of the Ace of Swords, the Page of Wands, and the Six of Swords. And when I talk about the swords, just really fast, I want to let everybody listening in on the basis of that energy. In the tarot, the swords are air energy. So these are your thoughts, your logical mind, your thinking, the structures that you build for yourself in terms of your mindset, the way you see the world. And so having these swords coming out is letting me know that there's a lot going on in the changing of your logical mind, and really allowing yourself to see how, as you heal, your level of logic becomes so much sharper. Your reasoning becomes sharper. It's like, I'm seeing in my head one of those Rube Goldberg machines, you know, where our old logic can sometimes feel like a Rube Goldberg machine. And that's the type of thing where, you know, it's like, you push the basketball, it falls in the bucket, which falls down. And then, you know, it's like this series of events that have to happen for the end to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the game Mousetrap that we used to play as kids.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And as we're building our lives, as we're learning how to be in the world, it's like our brains are constructing this Rube Goldberg machine. It's almost analog for a really long time. And the more that we repeat a process, we kind of start noticing how our brains can take out middle steps. It's like learning addition or subtraction or multiplication, where you go from having to count on your fingers to one day just being like 7 + 4 is 11. And so it's showing me that as we're doing this healing, your logic is going to become a lot faster and more efficient. And that's going to help you to make much faster moves, where you're going to make much faster decisions. And when we're first on the healing journey, fast decisions, especially for trauma survivors, are usually people, like you were saying, people pleasing, or their knee-jerk reactions, or it's us trying to fix something or to satiate a need that comes from, I'm going to call it like the dark place, right? That old, traumatized parts of ourselves will be making the decisions. And so fast equals dangerous. However, when you've been on the healing journey for a while, there's this really beautiful message coming through that feels like this love letter from ourselves that's saying, listen, as you get more and more healed, as you let yourself find more and more of who you are, you're going to get to this point where things can speed up again in a safe way. It feels like this little secret. Things get to speed up again, but it's okay and it's safe because you're moving in healthy ways. And so there's going to be more efficiency in your logic. You can trust it this time. When you get to this point and you feel yourself being ignited by ideas instead of being carried away by them. So there's this nuance coming through. It's when you get ignited, passionate, you start going down the rabbit hole, you start following logic paths and coming to conclusions that feel really good and making decisions like that. It's different than getting swept up in a moment and getting carried away by crowd mentality or how someone else thinks they know what's best for you. So there's this neat nuance that's going to happen on this journey. And where it leads to, this is the last card, where it leads to is the Ace of Pentacles. And it's this beautiful glowing yellow card.
Stop it.
It's
stepping
being
into
handed,
your power. Oh my gosh.
Stepping directly into your power and knowing that you already have roots there. You already have roots there. Yeah.
Can you put up the last 3 cards again? Because I was super drawn to something.
Yeah.
So if you're watching the video, and if not, I'll describe this to you. So there's this idea that, so the first one is like the Ace of Swords. There is like this crow up in the top corner. So it's like basically like it kind of seems like your mind is being illuminated. It's like you're connecting to like your intuition and your higher self. You're stepping into your like power, your playfulness, you're figuring out where you want to go. And then it's really interesting because the crow is up by your head, and then you step into this 6 of Swords energy, and these crows are leading the boat. It's almost like your intuition, and also like, to me, crows symbolize like metamorphosis, this transition, right? And it's actually really powerful for me because I have been seeing crows following me on my walks, and it's been like huge fat crows that just sit there and they just follow me, and they sit there and they stare at me, and I'm like, what is going on right now? But it is, and it's this like symbol of connection to not only like your spiritual self, but of metamorphosis and change. And so I find it really interesting that the imagery on the cards also dictated that. And sometimes that's too, like if you're newer to reading cards, and I'm sure you would know significantly better than I do, that sometimes you're just drawn to different imagery that helps bring the message through. Even if you've never seen a specific detail on a card, all of a sudden your eye goes zoop, and your intuition zooms in and it makes sense of a story for you. And that's what I find really interesting. It's not just regurgitating like the meaning of what things are. And that's why I love how you do things, because it's very intuitive based. And it's interesting how my intuition also pulled on something that continues the story.
My intuition wants to respond to your intuition for a second, because I felt like there was something else. So this other really cool thing that just popped in my head is that if you've ever seen crows, the way they build their nests, so literal crow's nests, they're attracted to shiny objects. And so they'll literally feather the interior of their nest with little shiny things that they pick up. So buttons or pieces of tinsel or glitter or other feathers. So from the outside, a crow's nest will look very plain, but when you look into it, there's usually some sparkliness and some treasure in there. And so again, what you were saying about being led by the intuition, it's also like, it may look plain and normal from the outside, but if you just change your perspective a little bit and go inward, there's some treasure there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Okay. And what's really weird is I just intuitively picked up my blue goldstone pyramid and I've been playing with it. So
love it.
And it's literally, it's so shiny.
It's like so shiny. It looks glittery. Yeah,
it is. It does. It has glittery in it. And I think this is also has to do with like stepping into, and it's the blue too. So we're talking about like the throat chakra, using your voice, stepping into your power, but also it's like being seen is kind of what I get with this, like being seen and being recognized for your gifts is kind of what I'm getting with this. And I just like, literally, I have so many crystals around me. I started picking it up. And I was like,
I love it.
This is interesting. So, oh my gosh, my mind is just like blown in the best way. And I'm very grateful that my intuition was like, hey, reach out to this one, because I think there's something that needs to come through. And we hadn't really connected before. I just been like silently watching and been like, cold call, would you want to connect and would you want to talk on a podcast? And you're like, yeah, but don't sell me something. And I'm like, oh wait, no. Which is, it just led to this powerful conversation that I think for a lot of people, I feel like we just opened some eyes.
Like, I hope so.
I don't know. I'm also like, really, I'm seeing like blue and yellow, like being allowed to use your voice to step into your personal power is kind of what I'm getting here. And I'm looking at my little sun thing. This is actually, it was a gift for a while ago. And it was kind of like the essence of your soul painting. And it's this sun with a face on it. And it's really, I'm like really drawn to it right now in the background, that it's the yellow sun coming through. It's you stepping into your power. And there's this like dark blue around it, like by you just allowing yourself to use your voice and to listen to that intuitive voice to move forward.
I'm going to blow your mind for a second.
Okay, please do.
Because I love what you just said. And I just want to show for the people on the video, and I'll narrate it for people who are just on audio, is that you did not see, I'm just going to say, ethically speaking, Taylor did not see what I'm about to show anybody before we got on this call. Okay. So I'm just going to tilt up my camera here, and above where I'm sitting is a painting that my husband did. And it's got a yellow background and it's got a blue dragon on it.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's literally the opposite colorscape of what you just pointed out, where you said it's the blue outline and then the blue background with the yellow sun in the middle. And mine's the yellow with the blue in the middle. So I just.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to bring this over for people. Hold on.
Okay. Wow. I love that.
And it's like the dark blue and the light blue. It's like, to me, it's like the dark and the light. And then it's like, honestly, what was really interesting to me, and this is one of the first ways like I started recognizing that we are connected. The person who did this painting never saw a picture of me. This is like my eye color. My eye color is really unique because it's almost like turquoise. It's like a gray blue. It's identical. And I keep this around. The more I step into my power, the more I feel like it's this like quiet, confident energy that's shining through and allowing and like bringing people to use their voice.
Yeah. Full chills.
Like, what?
It's beautiful.
I
have 100% chills right now. That's so beautiful. Yeah. Just being able to marvel, right? We're not hurting anybody. Just us being able to marvel and have this moment together. Like, this is what my highest intention is for everyone to be able to do, to play with life, to play in these energies, to really be able to let things go and let yourself have fun and believe in magic. Like, look at how good, where we're like, oh my God, I got chills. Yeah. But it feels so good. It's fun.
So good.
And I'm like, for me, I'm kind of like, this can't be wrong to enjoy a moment with someone who, we've had a couple of conversations, but we don't really know one another. And like, look at how much connection we've developed over just the past couple of hours.
Yep.
Being able to go deep with each other, being able to trust one another, being able to trust ourselves, and then have this really beautiful moment where we got to share these cool things in the background of where we're sitting.
Yeah.
It's magic.
It connects to a message that like somehow wild.
And that other people will probably take what they, I'm hoping that they'll take what they need from this conversation. They'll be able to, and they'll probably be focusing on something totally different than what we're focusing on, but they'll be like, that still rings true.
Yeah.
That still rings true for me. So it's really this stepping into your power, stepping into your voice, stepping into your I am energy. Who are you? You are. You get to define it.
Yeah. And I have this sense too, like we already know who we are. It's just a matter of uncovering all the layers that the world told us we were, that our soul knows, our heart knows.
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. This is exactly what I needed. I don't know about you, but my heart is just exploding right now. And I'm so glad that we had this conversation. And I really hope for people listening that like, hopefully this helped destigmatize the whole spirituality, woo-woo, witchy, whatever you want to call it. It is just the journey of coming back to yourself. And when you take all the tools away, it's just connection, human connection between each other, connection between how we function in the world around us, and connection to ourselves. And I love being able to have these conversations and I'm seeing stars in the sky. Like I'm thinking of like, it's really interesting. This is probably going to happen after the release. And I have no idea what this is going to be, but I'm really drawn to like the new Taylor Swift album that's coming out, Midnights.
Yeah.
It's like the dark blue and I'm seeing like gold stars illuminating, and that somehow that album is illuminating a truth deep down within her that she hasn't quite yet expressed yet. And it'll be interesting to see after this comes out how this plays out. But like, that's what I'm getting, that like we are illuminating truths about ourselves, and we're starting to share them not only with ourselves and getting the courage to do that, but sharing it with the world the deeper we go into healing. And it doesn't have to be all at once, but it's happening. And it's this beautiful process. And it makes my heart so happy to be able to see that. And I'm literally seeing like the image of like the lotus flower blooming in my head. That's been the symbol of this community for so long, is like, you've been through the deepest, darkest, hardest stuff. And you've been able to take that and you're blooming and you're like you're getting ready to this point where like you're about ready to sparkle and like shine that into the world, that self-actualization piece. That's where we're all headed. And it's beautiful and powerful. And this conversation just gives me so much hope for that, for not only myself, not only for you, but for everyone listening. It's just gorgeous. It's like gorgeous imagery, and just thinking that like we're all headed there.
Yeah.
That's freaking beautiful.
I'm so grateful for this conversation.
Me too. It's been
so nice talking with you. And I hope that everybody walks away with something.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know they will. I'm sure we're going to be like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it this way. Like we're going to be loaded with messages. I know this is happening, but okay. So let's rein it in a little bit. People, what do you offer? What do you do? How can they connect with you? How can you support people in this journey? Because we already know you can, but how can they find ways to connect with you and take this step further with you?
Yeah. So free resources of mine are on usually Instagram. I'm at the Femme Genius. And then if you are looking for readings, I offer one-on-one readings, and those are available through my website, lizzamorski.com. And I also host different retreats, also intro to tarot and advanced tarot courses from time to time. So if you hop on my Instagram and sign up for my newsletter, you'll get information on offerings and how things evolve in my business from time to time. But it comes back to mainly readings, mentorship, and like I said, you get some free good vibes on Instagram through me. So I'm always happy to have people there.
I know. And I'm not someone who interacts a lot on Instagram, because honestly, it's so much of my time and energy just creating. So when I see things and I'm drawn to them, I'm like, I don't even think to like sometimes even comment or like, but in my head, I'm like, wow, I'm really drawn to that. I really like that. And you just kept popping up on my page, and like, literally your energy just draws people in. And I love that. Thank you for stepping into your authenticity and being able to support people in this way. And it's interesting. It's like, you consider yourself a psychic and that's what you do. But I hope you realize that like so much of what you do is really supporting healing in others.
Yeah.
That you and I are no different in that regard. So I hope that people listening who are feeling drawn to that, check it out. Even if you're just like, I want an example of how to step into my authentic self, please connect with her. It has helped me open my heart in ways that I didn't know was possible, even in just this conversation. And, I think that's one of the gifts that you have, is just like opening people up. And it's beautiful.
You.
So
thank you.
It's been an honor.
Pleasure.
Oh
Thank
my goodness.
You so much.
Yes. Everyone definitely go check her out. Stay tuned. And yeah, all the things will be listed in the show notes. And just remember that like it's possible for you and you're stepping into yourself. So, all right. Have a wonderful day. Bye everyone.